Hello, and welcome to another episode of the AI Game Changers podcast. Today's guest, I am very, very excited to have this dude on the show. Robin is the CEO and co-founder of Apheris. He's also a client of mine, and I've known Robin for a good couple of years now. But as soon as I started to release the episodes again, I knew that I had to get Robin on the show because he is such a cool guy. He's probably one of the most passionate, driven, awesome dudes that I know in Germany, and I think what he and the guys at Apheris are doing is super inspirational and definitely a story worth sharing. So I knew that I had to get him on the podcast, and I've done that. So today we're going to be diving into his background, how he got into artificial intelligence, and his journey starting Apheris. But then we're also going to talk about the challenges that he's overcome through growing and building a startup over the past couple of years. So I hope you enjoy the episode, and I hope you love Robin as much as I do. He's a super cool guy, and as I say, I think he's one to listen to and one to watch. So check it out and let me know what you think.
Welcome to the AI Game Changers podcast with Luke Whips.
The first kind of thing then, Robin, if we can just go into your background, because I think one of the interesting things about you is you've not come from like a traditional background, I guess. Like you've done a lot of things you've done some stuff in financial services, didn't you? And then you've done a biotech startup, and you've got quite a varied background. So maybe if you could take us right back to what you studied, where you studied, all of that sort of stuff, and give us a kind of like academic background. And then maybe give us a story about how that transitioned for you into real life, like after university. Like, what did you do? What did you want to do? Where was your head at? All of that sort of stuff. And then we can kind of just take it from there.
A bit happy to. Quite a diverse academic background, studied medicine. Then after my first state examination, switched to philosophy and math. So I've 3 university degrees, but my highest degree is still a bachelor. And then towards the end of my studies, I was like almost accidentally, started to be what I today would call a solopreneur. Effectively saw some niche in a market, and started building an Excel sheet and asked a front-end developer to put an interface on it, and then did individual sales towards physicians, so evaluating physicians' practices, and made some early money with that, and then didn't at that point in time know a thing about venture capital, like the tech industry. And so ultimately I ended up joining the largest Swiss bank, UBS, working in, different departments, basically searching for that thing that is like fast-paced, where you are, working with people that are driving impact. And so at that point in time, I thought I would find that in a global bank and quite a neat team there. But soon I recognized that effectively the key people that I was inspired by were actually some of our customers, which were entrepreneurs, then coming to the bank and basically doing a mix of ultra high net worth and investment bank deals. But when I was getting in contact with some of those self-made billionaires, I was quite inspired by how much impact you can actually have if you understand money not as a primary thing to consume, but actually to do something with it. And some of the people were doing something good with it. Some of the people were just multiplying it or replicating it. But regardless of that, I saw that there's some, some kind of power in having access to capital that goes beyond what you would normally think of when you're trying to, gather capital to consume. And effectively those learnings then mid 2017 pushed me on that path to do that myself. And so, tested different ideas since then. So it's the third startup since then. First of all, we were developing an automatic speech recognition for children with language disorders. So health tech, niche market, and quite, impactful and meaningful product. Handed that over to university at some point, but effectively quickly learned that you cannot build a large company around that because the niche is just too small. And then I went on and joined Entrepreneur First, which, for those who don't know it, is like basically an accelerator program. They sometimes call themselves the Y Combinator of Europe, backed by Reid Hoffman, and founded a company there called Janus Genomics. And that was effectively trying to build tools for genomics data, right? So making it easier for a biologist to apply machine learning to genomics data. And we were building those early, let's say, products and interfaces and shipped them to pharma companies and genomics companies to just get feedback. And learned, and that was the most valuable feedback of that entire venture. We learned that those tools were just not worth anything because the data input that was needed was distributed and couldn't be centralized due to regulatory constraints. And that was like the first time when I discovered a problem that was far larger than the problem that we were solving at this point in time with that very specific application. And we were formulating a new hypothesis and quickly saw, okay, that's actually a problem across the entire field of bringing AI applications to the large enterprise world. How do you get access to complementary data of multiple parties when it cannot be shared, either due to regulatory constraints or commercial risks? And that's what we are effectively solving today with Apheris.
You've beat me to my next question, to be honest, Robin, because I think the thing that I really wanted to kind of get into was how you conceptualized Apheris, because when we first spoke, I was like, shit, what a good idea. Like, how is this not already a thing, firstly? And it's such a obvious thing, it's like, if it could work and it there's a platform out there that could enable what you guys do, it could be game changing for the industry, right? So, I mean, you beat me to the question about how did you, where did this come from and where did it kind of stem from? But maybe for the listeners that don't necessarily know who Apheris are or what you guys do, could you break down the business in the best possible way you can and just, give us a bit of insight to what it is you guys do?
100%. So happy to try that. So first of all, in an old world, I'm talking about an old world, but right now, what the industry typically does is, when you're trying to build data products, be it AI-enabled data products or just simple data products based on analytics that feed into a dashboard, whatever you look at, what you typically need is some kind of direct access to data. And the, let's say, entire data landscape that has grown over the last decade is really built upon that assumption that at some point, a department, a user, an organization has direct access to data and can then apply all their tools, starting from pre-processing that data, governing that, analyzing it, deploying a model, etc. Now, the difficulty with that is that what we call complementary value of data is not unlocked. And complementary value of data means when multiple departments, organizations have data that if you could take them together, put them in one place, and you would analyze them, that then this value of this data pool really increases dramatically in its overall value. But effectively, as we're living in a world where there's competitive threats, regulation, etc., all of those companies are doing that themselves. And what is really challenging, well, maybe first of all, what are we doing against that? And then B, why is that challenging and not the status quo yet? So first of all, what we do is we go to companies and say, look, you have all your data, and it is quite an obvious pitch that there's complementary data value of your data asset and potentially a partner, customer, or supplier. And what you don't want to do, and that's what has been asked 5 years ago, is directly share those data sets. And there are a couple of reasons why you don't want to do that, be it regulatory constraints or commercial risks. What if you could keep your data in your environment? You don't move it. All the data stays under your full control, but you can still analyze those data sets by just turning that concept around of needing to share data, but instead sending analytics requests to those data sets that you're currently analyzing for internal purposes and giving you control over that process. And so that's effectively the Apheris platform from a technical perspective. It's called a federated architecture. That means data stays with the data owners in then multiple locations. And we somehow ensure that a user can send their computation requests with all those logics that are needed for that to those different environments, then compute there locally with the controls that the data providers set up, and then share only the computational result, so the insight. If we are talking AI, the machine learning model or the weights instead of the raw data. So that's the key concept. And what is, let's say, there are multiple challenges why this hasn't been done before, starting from technical challenges and ending in commercial challenges. And happy to share more of those over the course of this session. But in particular, why this hasn't really happened before is because this shift of doing something the other way around. So instead of taking central data and applying all your tools to it, taking decentral data and then bringing all those tools back there is actually, like from an engineering perspective, quite a tricky thing to do. Because if you think about how much energy companies have done into building up their data pipelines, building up their ways to control all of that. Now, taking those and then distributing those is actually quite difficult. And so rather what we are fighting against or like building up is actually like a way to integrate all of those existing tools such that this is not something entirely new that doesn't build upon what we've invested in over the last decade.
Because it's not... federated learning is not kind of a new thing, right? And I think that, well, from my experience working with you guys and speaking to people in the industry, lots of people see the value in federated learning and federated data access, right? But I think, as you say, the process to enable that, for me, it's, well, from the feedback that I've had anyway, it's kind of twofold. So number one, I think there's an educational piece around it where people don't really know how that's going to impact their business or what it means to them. And it's, as you say, if you're completely flipping an industry on its head, there's always going to be that scale up period of just explaining what it is to people and how it works and just venturing down that road. But then also from a technical standpoint, the complexities of, as you say, how to make that work purely from an engineering standpoint is, it's not as easy as giving someone a USB stick and saying, just give it back when you're done, right?
Yeah, so I think I think you're making a good point here in making sure that the business side understands what that actually means, and that's like as well one of the key learnings that we took. Funnily, like when I think about when we started in 2019, we typically had to explain what federated learning is, and let's say in those early days, this technical education piece was quite prominent. Today, if I go to a chief data science officer, they know what federated learning is. They've heard about it, and they are assessing it in terms of what value does it bring to me. The problem is, and that's why today I don't consider Apheris as a federated learning company. What we are building is a platform for collaborative data ecosystems, and the ability to run federated learning on top of such a platform is like one small piece to it. But what we are effectively doing is connecting data, tooling, logic around it across organizational boundaries. And then the training step of that can be a federated learning algorithm. So sometimes as well, I compare that if you think of an ML ops platform, right? The ML training piece is such a small piece, but there's so much data preparation, curation, harmonizing it, mapping it to a common data model, then feature engineering, then like governing that data ingestion, and then model training, then model deployment, and again, like auditability, traceability. That's an ML ops platform. And effectively, in order to unlock that complementary data value that sits across organizations, what you need to do is build up such a funnel that really unlocks that data value. And that federated learning algorithm is just a single piece. And that's why we're as well seeing that many federated learning frameworks, companies that provide such frameworks, startups are not successful in getting this off the ground because that's not where the value lies. The value lies in how do you connect data sets meaningfully, repeatedly across organizational boundaries. And so today, when I look at some of the most powerful applications for us, it's as simple as a correlation between two data sets that sit in two parties and that help you to spot an anomaly early. But building up that correlation means you have to align on a data model, map it, ingest it, build some logic and governance around it, etc. And getting that off the ground is, from an engineering and integration perspective, just difficult. And yeah, so I would say that's and educating on this is actually something that we take today far more serious, and that's as well like one of the key things we heavily invest in at the moment. And that's actually not education on like core technologies that are fancy and new, like federated learning or privacy enhancing techniques, but rather it's educating on how do you get this off the ground such that it drives business value? How do you create a business model that incentivizes those both parties to create that early first use case where the large enterprise organization gets buy-in from all stakeholders, right? Those educational pieces are super important. And so that's what we are focused on today. And I think, just shifting from deep tech more towards that commercial drive is something that has helped us tremendously in being more successful.
So the Apheris platform, Robin, so just so I and the listeners really understand, so the platform essentially works in three ways, right? And stop me if I'm going down the wrong road, but intercompany, so like intercompany data access across internal organization that might be super siloed and have really difficult access to other parts of the business, right? That's part one. Part two is partner, like inter-partner data access, so complementary data sets across, I don't know, let's say insurance and automotive, for example. There might be a nice blend there. And then thirdly, it's kind of like competitive companies. So like the pharmaceutical landscape, for example, for drug discovery, they would be able to access industry-wide data across multiple organizations that are doing the same kind of research to provide a wider, more comprehensive view on what they're trying to do, right? Am I on the right kind of path there?
Yeah, those are the different type of, let's say, use cases if you segment it from kind of like the how do enterprises use it? So not on the industry or type of data products that they build upon it, but rather for what purposes do they use it? So that's correct. I think so. We call that category collaborative data ecosystem, and some of them are very open. That's that kind of like last piece where you think of almost a self-sustaining collaborative data ecosystem where data consumers and data providers can join and exchange and almost build something like a data marketplace. That is obviously something that just from an impact and vision perspective is top of mind, but typically where companies start with is in that bucket 1 or 2, where you have a set of partners. It's called a closed collaborative data ecosystem, either between multiple departments that, for example, within an enterprise span across multiple countries where just regulation prevents you from directly sharing this data, or between a set of companies, so across organizations, but then it's typically partners, suppliers, customers, so a handful to a dozen of companies that want to collectively share and manage data and build that up as a capability. And then this typically starts with picking one concrete use case where you see a business value being driven for a concrete department, but all of those companies have understood that this is a capability that will dramatically change how the industry will operate. And most of them as well in their vision in like say 5 to 10 years want to turn that into more of an open collaborative data ecosystem where you as well have those marketplace type of dynamics.
Gotcha. Right. So, I mean, if you looked at those three buckets, would you say there's like risk associated to what you guys do? Because I mean, bucket number 1, intercompany, like internal data access across a an enterprise organization. That for me makes perfect sense. And there would be I would imagine there's no huge risk to that kind of bucket there, right? But part 2 and part 3, maybe there are some things that could potentially be quite risky for companies, right? Or what is their perceived risk on using something like you guys? Like, what do they think is the worst thing that could happen?
Yeah. So first of all, maybe let's quickly look at kind of like what type of companies we are partnering with and where we are in the market. This is still an early market. And so what we are currently targeting is what you could still call early adopters. So companies or as well like stakeholders that are looking for an industry-leading change and want to often make their career with it. And so those are stakeholders that have been quite leading in adopting MLOps tools, building data products, operationalizing them. So they have already seen what value it produces if you're really taking, let's say, data science platforms and unlocking value from it. And now they are looking for how can I extend that and extend the existing IP that I built up and increase my market access, increase the portfolio of data products that I'm driving value with by increasing my data access. So those type of, let's say challenges and pain points are the ones that we build upon. Now, what we are lucky with is that all of those stakeholders are willing to take a risk at the beginning. And I think in particular, if you're selling into enterprise as a startup, you need those champions that want to do that and believe in you. Otherwise, you won't get off the ground, because there are so many mission critical things that as you roll that out to the market, people will start caring about the risk. And so you need those stakeholders that basically help you get through there. Now, so in that sense, our buyer is typically the one that is interested in the value and then helps us mitigate those risks for the stakeholders that are responsible for assessing that and basically giving their approval. Now, the typical risks that parties see is, let's say, one on the business side. So how do you build up a collaborative data ecosystem that ultimately creates dynamics for all participants that they continue to invest into that? Often collaborative data ecosystems have the property that there's often just one of that kind in the entire market. So I'll give you a concrete example. Say you are operating in a specific disease and now want to build a disease-specific collaborative data ecosystem. It's quite likely that there's just one or two of those collaborative data ecosystems on the entire market. And that means you have to get it right. You have to find those data partners and they must participate in your network. Otherwise, you won't drive that value. And so those are typically things that are handled on the business side. And this is what the buyer cares for. And so we educate them a lot and help them understand how to mitigate those risks. And that has to do with what type of business model do you actually build on top of the platform? So that's not an inherent Apheris risk, but that's rather how does our buyer use the Apheris platform to set up a collaborative data ecosystem and create incentives for all parties such that this becomes sustainable and incentivizes data partners to participate. And so there are a lot of questions around fairness and how do you attribute value. And then B, which is more on our side, are obviously all of those risks of working with a startup from an enterprise perspective, getting access or giving access to data. Even if it's in your own controlled environment, you still need some kind of connection. And so obviously all those typical InfoSec questions arise and are top of mind. And yeah, we've, as a startup, so first of all, I've the best co-founder I can wish for, and he is incredibly careful and risk conscious as well from a product and tech perspective, and that has allowed us to as well start selling into quite regulated industries. So today we are operating in pharma, manufacturing, as well like with security critical data. So very, very tough to get in and very sticky if you land. Mm-hmm. And that's this is attributed to my co-founder who just like leads those conversations very professionally. And yeah, so I think those are things that you have to get right as a young startup, and that's really hard. And so, I mean, yeah, just looking at that initial set of customers that are now using the platform in production for security critical or highly regulated data, just how much value that is for a company like us, those proof points, the ability that we've gone through all of those risk assessments, pen tests, etc. That really gives you a competitive edge, because that's something that you can build up because the idea is nice. So
it must be quite a difficult challenge for you guys to balance that kind of risk v speed equation, I guess, because as a young startup, the benefit of what you guys have got is the ability to move in a bit of an agile way and scale quickly and do things in a kind of like quick prototyping perspective. But then you've got to balance that with that ultra highly regulated risk, underpinned risk kind of security model as well. That must be quite a difficult thing to balance between those two, right?
So, I mean, this is in particular top of mind for me right now, because we are just like starting to fundraise again in a bear market. And so somehow, and that's kind of like the key thing that investors try to understand is, what are your sales cycles and how can you effectively build a business model that repeats itself and can scale? And I think, yeah, with markets like pharma, like manufacturing, and we are more and more as well approaching markets like semiconductor, and then as well like the security and governmentals, which have partly sales cycles of 2 years. And so that literally can mean that this kills you, right? So you land a government customer. If you close them, that's like a deal that can get you off the ground. But if you lose them, at some point you've invested so much that can literally kill you. And that's why obviously an investor is looking into those as well, like individual risks that you're carrying with just a few customers, and all of them on, let's say high value, high priced enterprise licenses. I think, so first of all, when we founded this company, we were validating a couple of different ideas of where we can sell such a platform into and how we can bring it to market. And ultimately we ended up that the only meaningful business we can build is within enterprises. And so we just committed from very early days to build an enterprise business. And if you look at as well, the people we've hired, so we've hired Bridget, who comes from Databricks, built up EMEA sales there, a fantastic person from ISI, and so on and so forth. So all of those people that have operated in highly regulated enterprise industries. And so that's part of our DNA, and allows us as well to just like deal with those risks and build up respective departments that are needed for that. And then B, I think, like just from a vision perspective, we have been driven by impact as our primary target as well when choosing the type of verticals that we operate in. And I think there are other verticals out there that will probably have shorter sales cycles, like, for example, marketing data, where you have a bit more digital maturity, and as well, like people are just more thinking about revenue generation regardless of what for, as long as it generates revenue. And we have decided not to be active in those industries because we just felt that there is no impact to have. And while this creates struggles for us, it as well creates opportunities. Because we attract best-in-class talents that care. And so we are currently hiring from some of those companies that are just excellent, that have nailed it, that have product market fit, but just don't have real meaningful impact. And people are starting to search for that, and then as well join us. And so that's, I think, one key benefit that we get from that. And B, I think it's as well the right time to build an impact-driven company in such difficult spaces, as we are seeing that meaningful capital flows into those industries. And so, for example, we are operating as well in the sustainability industry alongside manufacturing. That is just like getting more and more capital. And it's clear for everyone that in 10 years from now, this is going to be a massive industry. And so I think it's the right bet to take if you are betting on a long-term journey. And so for us, it's just, we are not searching for investors that have those 3 to 5 year deal cycles. We are searching for investors that care, that are looking for a globally impactful company on a 10-year horizon. And as such, I think we can deal with those risks.
Awesome, man. I think, do you know what, Robin? Something that you, we've known each other for a while now, right? And I think I've got a fairly good gauge on you as a person. But one of the things that you always talk about is kind of like best in class. So best in class talent, product, strategy. I mean, when we first started working together, I was like, shit, this is someone that people are going to aspire towards, right? Because I think your expectations on pretty much everything are like sky high, right? Like, I don't think you're the type of person that deals with average or okay or good, right? You're always shooting for best in class, right? What's your take on the speed, the capability equation? So you guys need to grow quite quickly as a company, right? And I think you need to scale as an organization, generally speaking, but you'd never do that at the deficit of losing the excellence of people that join you, right? What's your take on that, generally speaking? And I guess if there was another founder or someone who's looking to, start an organization, what kind of advice would you give them? Because you're super, you never let anyone through the net, do you? So I guess what's your kind of take on just best in class talent and scaling and the combination between those two things?
Yeah. Fantastic question. And so first of all, I think, so our commitment to best in class across functions is one that I stand behind, and I would never consider anything else. I think it's absolutely the number one thing you need to be focused on as a founder to be able to build a really impactful and meaningful business. And as I'm doing it, I constantly find myself in that situation to recognize how hard that is to just across everything that you do. We are just talking about hiring, right? Best in class hiring, Luke. That's just so incredibly hard, and it's just one piece to what you need to do, right? And so, but ultimately, I'm a people-centric person, and so ultimately, I think that commitment to best in class people is that foundation and the minimum you need. It's essential, but it's definitely not enough. But it's essential to be able to even build a best-in-class company across functions. You need that talent. And I think just for us, building up that hiring capability, the network, working with best-in-class recruiters and doing that right. And you know that better than myself, how much noise and mess is out there and how much of a difference it makes if you're working with the right people. And I know that's the same for you, right? It's the same for a recruiter working. It's beautiful if you're working with the right founders, and it's a mess if you're not. So that learning, the way you interview. So there's a book, Hire with Your Head. Our most important investor, Ross Mason, the founder of MuleSoft, they have basically built upon that philosophy. That's something that I can definitely recommend reading early. But yeah, all of those capabilities is something that you need to build up in your early days, and that obviously takes time. And I think what we're currently seeing in, let's say, a shift in the market is that there has been this thinking that you can sacrifice growth for quality in people, quality in your business, underlying business, quality in your product. And the company we had before Apheris was built upon that premise, and luckily we failed in a very short time. But the only thing that we tried was grow quickly, focus on one key metric that just gives you more access to capital, and then try to run that wheel until somehow magically a business evolves and a company evolves. And we failed with that, and that meant that when we founded this company, we did not do so on that let's say, typical venture-backed mindset where you only focus on growth and scale, but we were focused on building that foundation. And I'm quite happy to see a shift in the market where investors, employees, start to understand that there's a real difference, and as well a real difference in compensation, right? So our shares mean something, because we have invested time, and we are still investing time into building those foundational pieces. And that carries through that every person that we hire is like really well thought of, has a clear area of responsibility, is best in class, knows what to do in their functions, and that ultimately makes as well the value of such shares. And so I think my key response is I would recommend everyone who actually intends to build a globally impactful company to accept that this will take time and go on that journey with that assumption. And if you're doing so, then actually all those ups and downs are just like ways for you to grow and build out your foundation that at some point you can scale. And that's as well what Ross taught me, is that it can go really quickly if you're finding that product market fit and go-to-market fit, and you've built that out. And that has led him to like 10x in the last years, and that has led to a $10 billion exit. But those early years from like 10 to 20 to 40 to 100 employees, like you can do that really quickly, but just like neglect the foundation, or you can do it right. And I mean, if you're a serial founder, you will do it quicker, right? So I'm not claiming that the thing that we have done until today could not have been done in a quicker way. It could have. But those learnings that got us here are the ones that actually make our foundation, and that includes the executives, their mindsets, their values, and all of that makes the company, and ultimately makes the future potential value of such a company. And so I would never sacrifice quality over scale.
Yeah, I think, do you know what as well, Robin? I hope you don't mind me saying this, but in the position that you guys are in as well, not just the fact that you're early stages, but also you're trying to build something that is new. It's not like there's 100 different comparables out there and you guys just do the service slightly better than other people. You're trying to change an industry and the way that data science and ML is done, full stop. So, I mean, the people that you bring into the business now it's imperative that you get that right, because if you're trying to move the structure of how things are done, you can't do that with, people might kill me for saying this, but like average people or B players, right? I mean, you need people that have got the capability and the mindset. I don't know if that's the right word, but the right kind of ingredients to actually change an industry. I mean, not everyone can do that, right?
100%. And I mean, like all of my thinking, reflection, and advice was based upon that hypothesis that that's like some of the type of startup someone considers joining and or building. I mean, obviously, if you are, I don't know, building Delivery Hero, you don't need those bike drivers to have an IQ of 150, right? So that's nothing that you should be searching for, but you're searching for someone that can execute upon something that is built like, and I think, just like for us, for example, sales is, we are selling high enterprise licenses. It's still founder-led sales, and we're currently shifting away from that. And we had the most competitive interviewing process, for the sales director, and have literally the best revenue leader that you can think of on the market. And, those are like individual people that will drive so much impact. But again, if you're selling a simple product and you sell that to the mass market, what you probably need is a sales playbook and someone who can write that sales playbook who must be excellent. And then an ability to get like 100 people that can just like execute on that sales playbook. And they are obviously like sometimes people need to sacrifice speed over quality against a competitor that is doing the same thing. I think that's not our case. And that as well makes let's say that makes the company identity, that our biggest competitive threat is the status quo and doing something transformational that has never been done before and is incredibly hard, and no one knows how to actually do it. And I think for those type of startups, this is definitely the right thing to focus on.
So you mentioned about the status quo being one of your biggest competitors, right? Or the biggest risk factors to you being successful if people just continue down that road, right? I mean, if we looked, people in data and ML always kill me for asking for predictions and stuff, because it's just not the way that they work, right, with their whatever. But I mean, if we looked kind of 10 years into the future, how do you see, Two questions actually. So, A, how do you see Apheris progressing and developing? Like, what does Apheris look like in a decade? But then, secondly, how, if you guys hit what you want to hit and you do what you say you're going to do, how does the data science landscape change? Like, how does it look different? And what do you think it will be? Like, what are the objective things that you'd be like, right, this is how we've impacted that market and this is how it kind of looks now?
Yeah,
I know that's a huge question, by the way. So
it's a huge question, and probably our last one because I have to jump shop.
yeah, we're good.
Cool. So first of all, I think the category of collaborative data ecosystem, so that ability for an enterprise to use data across organizational boundaries in a repeatable and scalable manner, that is what we are building. That market is the market we are opening up, and we want to become that category defining company. We have very, very good reasons to believe that this is a massive market, incredible impact potential, and we want to become that company that opens up this market. So in the Peter Thiel type of thinking, the one time in history where you can build that company. That's what we are trying. And so in 10 years from now, I imagine that thousands of the world's most impactful and largest collaborative ecosystem live on the Apheris platform with like biggest integration in those impactful industries: sustainability, healthcare, governmental, security, but obviously as well in other industries where this is relevant. What does that do to the data scientist who is ultimately, or the AI engineer who's ultimately the key user and our primary user? So let's say all of those investments into ML ops, into data tooling, into data ops that you've seen over the last decade, this is what is going to evolve across organizations. And so in 10 years from now, that will mean that all of those tools will just be plugged into, hopefully, the Apheris platform and then be executed somewhere else in a governed manner. And so in that sense, like, we are positioning ourselves as a highly integrated platform, because that's the only thing you will drive that change, because internal data science will obviously still be as relevant as today. And so I think the key thing that will change for a data scientist is that logic of, okay, when I start to build up my data pipelines and tooling and data products, is that step of, okay, how can I take like portions of it and execute it somewhere else and get something back? But we make that so incredibly easy that it's like just the status quo for an enterprise data scientist in 10 years from now.
Awesome, man. I think that's a nice place to end it. I'm looking forward to it, Robin. And honestly, dude, I wish you the best of luck as always. And thank you so much for your time today, man. I always enjoy talking to you. So thank you so much, man.
Same here. Thanks so much, Luke. And we'll be in touch.